And our webinar for today is titled Get Published in the Professional School Counseling Journal, and we are happy to be joined by our speaker, Carol Kaffenberger. Carol is a published author and is the practitioner research editor for the ASCA's Professional School Counseling Journal. Carol, you now have the floor.
Thank you very much, Jen. Today our session is aimed at school counselors, counseling supervisors, and counselor educators interested in conducting action research and then publishing the results. Our goals for today, our learning outcomes for today are to, at the end of this webinar, you should be able to explain what practitioner research is. And if you are working on a publication, a manuscript right now, we hope that this will provide you some guidance in the revision and the drafting process. And ultimately, we are interested in you submitting your manuscripts for consideration to be published in PSC. Our goals for today, I'm first going to start just by highlighting what the practitioner research section of the Professional School Counseling Journal is, and define practitioner research a little more clearly, and examples of practitioner research that we have published in PSC. I'd also like to describe practitioner research processes and talk about how to submit to PSC. And of course, I want to answer any questions that you have, and Jen will be monitoring questions, and we'll probably just wait till the end of the session to address those questions. So the Professional School Counseling Journal is considered the flagship journal of the school counseling profession. And the journal accepts three types of submissions. One is featured research, one is conceptual, and the third is practitioner research. We're going to be focusing on the practitioner section of the journal today. ASCA's goal is to encourage practitioner research. Ultimately, PSC's audience is school counselors, and yet the majority of articles in PSC have been written by counselor educators. There's been a call from the profession repeatedly to increase the practitioner research journal articles, and this has been underscored by a Delphi study that was conducted in 2015 by Valeres and Dimmitt. And what a Delphi study is a research that uses expert opinions to forecast future trends and directions, and it's used often to identify research priorities. And that is exactly the type of study that this study aimed to do. This study reflects the priorities of 31 school counselor experts, counselor educators, association leaders, district leaders, textbook authors, and practitioners. And they rated, through this Delphi process, they came up with a list of 40 research priorities. And I'm only going to share the top 8 with you, but I think it's telling that the 8 really focus on research that expands evidence-based practices and looking at evaluating the impact of using evidence-based practices or dominate even just the first 8 of these. So you can see the first 2, what are the best practices related to the use of evidence-based interventions and practices? What is the impact of using an ASCA model program as opposed to not using an ASCA model program? 3 and 4, again, one about best practices related to social justice, equity, advocacy, and closing the achievement gap. And the 4th one, using evidence-based interventions and practices on the program level. 5 and 6, again, best practices related to specific areas of school counseling work. And 7 and 8 have the same impact. So the profession understands that this is a goal, and this is a research agenda that we hope to promote. In fact, to that end, ASCA is offering grant funding for school counseling research. This is a new initiative that has been long expected and hoped for. The first grant, it would be for research projects comparing outcomes of ASCA model programs with ASCA, comparing them to non-ASCA model programs. And the second is for a research project that would determine the optimal student counselor ratio. The grantees have submitted their applications, and the grant winners will be announced in early June. But of course, ultimately, it's my hope that we will see the results of these studies published in PSC. So what is practitioner research? Practitioner research, also called action research, is a disciplined inquiry conducted by and for those taking action. It is typically designed and conducted by practitioners who analyze the data to improve their own practice. Practitioner researchers, it is usually conducted by a school counselor at the school or the district level for the purpose of improving interventions. So the purpose of school counselor research is to evaluate the impact of interventions designed for a particular group of students, class, school, or district. So it's very focused at the local level. The goals of practitioner research are to show how an intervention impacts a group and how to improve that intervention. Practitioner research is an iterative process. It is based on a belief that an intervention is developed and implemented to meet a specific need. That intervention then is measured using baseline and post-intervention data, and that results in a process of reflecting on what has been learned and potentially influence the program or intervention. In other words, this becomes a circle of learning from what we do, improving what we're doing, so that we're continually improving our practice. And this, in fact, is what we ask all school counselors to do when we say we want them to build a data-driven school counseling program. Practitioner research is not, by design, experimental, empirical, or hypothesis-based. And practitioner researchers have a dual role. They function both as researcher and provider of the intervention. They may collaborate with others, other counselors, teachers, counselor educators, and or district supervisors. But ultimately, we hope that every research submission has a school counselor as part of the research team. The practitioner research model involves 5 steps. A program is identified by reviewing existing student data, looking for academic and gaps, attendance or behavior problems. The counselor develops a plan, typically beginning by writing a goal based on baseline data and an identified improvement goal. The plan is implemented and post-intervention data is collected, perhaps by survey and by comparing outcome data pre and post. The analysis of the data involves reflection, discussion, sharing with others, and decisions about next steps. We're going to talk about some examples of this process and talk in more detail about this process a little bit later in the webinar. But right now, I'd like to share 2 examples of practitioner research that have been published in PSC and really do represent the type of manuscripts that are regularly submitted. The first is a relatively simple pre and post intervention study, And the second is a case study describing how a school responded to a particular issue and implemented a complex series of interventions. The first one focused on small group counseling to improve academic success for ESL students. And the second involved evaluating the impact of high school intervention designed to increase AP enrollment for African American students. I think both of these examples provide a worthy example of what we're looking for in practitioner research, and I just want to briefly describe both of them to you. The first one, written by Shi and Steen in 2013, it was published in 2013, involved using the Achieve Success Everyday model to promote self-esteem and academic achievement for ESL students. The research team in this case consisted of the counselor educator, a counseling education doctoral student who was a school counselor, and the school counselor at a particular site. The research question, will small group counseling, the ASE model, improve self-esteem and academic success for ESL students? The participants for this study were 16 middle school students who participated in two groups that met 1 hour for 1 hour sessions for 5 weeks. Before the group started, the Cooper-Smith self-esteem inventory was administered to get a baseline of self-esteem issues. GPA was the other measurement, and it was the comparison of the GPA before and after the intervention at marking period end. Interestingly, and just to mention this study was initially submitted for feature research, but what it was apparent to both the reviewers and the authors is that this study did not meet the test of featured research in scope or size, but in fact was an excellent example of practitioner research. So we're really looking at a very different type of research when we ask authors to share their practitioner research. We do require for practitioner research submission that there is a good literature review that really provides the reason why the study would be useful and tells us more about what the need for this kind of study. And in this case, what the authors shared was that the percentage of students in the 5 to 12 year age group speaking in another language has doubled since 1980. However, the achievement gap that exists between ESL students and non-ESL students is very large. In their research, they cited the data from a 2008, the NEEP data that said that only 29% of ESL students in 8th grade reach proficiency as compared to 73% of non-ELL students. The other research that they refer to is the research that supports a link between academic success and self-esteem. However, there is very little research looking at that link between ESL students and self-esteem issues as related to academic achievement. So the intervention that Shi and Steen implemented was the ASE group. The activities were aimed at building relationships, improving self-esteem, academic performance, and they used a variety of group activities and process activities to achieve these goals. In the article itself, you will see that they share examples from their lesson plans, which I think provide another good example of what we like to see in practitioner research, so that that we're really attracting our practitioners when we are providing suggested best practice activities. So the results of this study were that of the 16 students, 12 of them increased their GPA for an overall increase of 10.5% after the intervention. There was also significance in improvement in 3 areas of self-esteem: general self-esteem, social self-esteem with peers, and improved interactions at home. This article then goes on to discuss these results, what these results mean to this particular site, and then also provide some implications for school counselors, some guidance for school counselors as they are working with their ESL students. The second study, Davis and Mobley, published in 2014, entitled "The School Counselor's Role in Addressing the Advanced Placement Equity and Excellence Gap for African American Students." This study I would consider a case study in that it describes the year-long intervention designed to increase African American participation and also to influence, hopefully to influence and improved results of taking the AP exam. The authors and researchers in this case consisted of a school counselor intern who was also a PhD student, an AP teacher, and a school counselor educator, and other school counselors at the school were involved, but these were the 3 authors and researchers. The issue at the school was that only 12%, less than half of the population of African American students at this research site were enrolled in AP courses. And that is in spite of an AP potential program having been instituted and other recruiting strategies that had not been successful. So the research question for this case study was, will participation in a school counselor-driven AP support program increase African American success on the AP exam? The literature review for this paper, I think, also provides another really interesting practitioner-focused component, and I want to talk about that in a second. But the literature review begins by sharing that African American students, although comprising about 15% of the national population at the time that they collected this data, only 9% comprised only 9% of the AP population of students. And of the students taking the AP exam in 2011, this is a national statistic, only 4.1 earned a passing grade. And in fact, more than half earned the lowest possible score on this test. And what is very concerning about this is that African American students, the gap in their performance and not their participation is so much lower than any other racial or ethnic group. So this needs some attention. So what they did was basically take a look at what some best practices would be, and they found the work of Ford Milner, published in 2005, that examined and made recommendations about best practices that became the roadmap for the implementation of an intervention that this research team used. Their recommendations were that first, administrators, teachers, and school counselors must be active in figuring out what are the barriers for African American students at your particular school, what's creating this achievement gap, and so that whatever interventions are developed, they're basically developed based on what the needs are for this group. And the second recommendation is that African American students must be closely monitored and may benefit from interventions like study skills and time management. A third recommendation is that teachers and school counselors build relationships with African American students built on trust and concern and positive regard. Fourth, that they build a sense of community among students participating in AP. And lastly, that they would benefit from individual and group counseling focused on social learning, personal, social, and academic needs, as well as racial identity and self-concept. So this research team took this to heart. And so they began by deciding to take a look at who potentially could take this course. And they were able to come up with a list of 35 African American students at this school who had never taken an AP course, who all had a 3.0 average or better, and had scored at least 85% on national testing. They met individually with these students, they met with their parents, and the AP teacher explained the course and what would be involved in this to each one of these 35 students. What resulted was that 13 of the students agreed to participate in the year-long AP course along with counseling support, and 10 of the students decided to take the AP course but did not want to participate in the group support. So in effect, without them wanting to, they were able to, had created a control group for this particular study. So they considered their process a three-step process, and I've just described how they went about the business of recruiting students. The second step that they took in terms of recruiting the students, I've also discussed. The third step, I think, is very interesting. They chose to conduct a 2-week summer program preceding the school year held at the university with the goal of creating a sense of family among the students and an understanding of the AP equity gap, and to explore the students' fears. The students participated in a daily trust-building activity as well as interacting with achievement-minded African-American students on the campus. And this group was led by the school counseling intern and the AP teacher. So throughout the school year, these 13 students, first of all, they were all placed in the same AP class. And weekly, 30 minutes of their class time was used to conduct a group counseling session. And originally, the thought was that this session would be used for building skills around being successful in an AP class, or maybe study skills or organizational skills. But in fact, what the students wanted was a chance to continue building the social support and sense of community that they had begun in the summer. The results of this study were that the group receiving additional support outperformed the control group and national statistics for African American students, and performed as well as the white students at this school. The students in the cohort also built a community and support for one another, and the article goes on to discuss specific ways that were observed in terms of how this experience changed school for the students in this group. So again, both of these studies, I think, represent the type of studies that we're interested in. What are school counselors doing, and how can that be described in a practitioner journal in a way that can be shared as guidance to other school counselors? So I want to talk a little bit more about the practitioner research process. And first, to reiterate the question that I get a lot, which is who can conduct this research? our number one person that we would love to see conducting this research are practicing school counselors. They're collecting data every day. They're using data to make decisions about their students. We'd love them to work on turning this into research. School counseling coordinators and district supervisors are also very interested in writing about the successes in their district and often make great partners with school counselors in terms of writing up some of their work. We have teachers, just as you saw in this last example, we have teachers often willing to be partner in the research story. Counselor educators are probably our number one mentors. Often is counselor educators who are coming to the schools with their ideas, with their theories about what can work to address problems at the school. And because counselor educators are placing students in districts, they often have a good relationship with a local school district and are often very willing to help school counselors write about what they're doing. And by the way, we've also started another subsection in the practitioner research section of the journal, which is inviting school counseling interns to write about the action research that they're conducting, often as part of their practicum and internship experiences. And the requirements for writing these usually half semester research studies up is much less rigorous even than practitioner research. So I would invite you to, counselor educators, to talk with me about this, and I can send you some more information about it. And that's exactly what I was just talking about. School counseling interns are often, they certainly were writers and researchers in the two studies I just shared, but we are seeing more and more school counseling interns wanting to talk about what they're doing. So ideally, whoever the team of researchers are, a school counselor is part of that research team. We see three types of practitioner research. Often we see just an individual school counselor writing about the work that she or he is doing at their school. We see collaborative practitioner research where possibly a group of counselors in a district or a group of counselors at a school are working with other teachers, administrators to conduct research. And then we have, just like the case that I just shared, school-wide research where a host of people are part of the research process. Let's go back and talk specifically about what this research process might look like for those of you who may be interested in starting to think a little bit more about how you want to conduct research. The first step in conducting practitioner research is to decide what that issue is going to, that focus is going to be. And we recommend that you focus on something that potentially is a problem or an issue at your school. Something potentially you've been worried about at your school. You've tried a variety of strategies and you want to be more systematic in your analysis of data so that you can really understand what the issue is and start to test interventions to improve the outcome for addressing that particular problem. We certainly know where we can find data. We have lots of data we can review, but I also recommend that you look at your school improvement plan to see what are the concerns in your school district. What is the focus for how your administrators want you to be focusing your attention and helping students. And your goals can be very much like those of a teacher in terms of closing academic gaps, increasing attendance, and improving behavior. You're just doing it using school counselor tools. So the first step is to identify a research question or set a goal. In the work world of school counselors, we often call this a SMART goal. What do you want to achieve? The second step is to make a plan and take action. How will you remediate the group? How will you contribute to knowledge about the intervention? What goals are you going to identify? What is your plan of action? For instance, if you were going to conduct group counseling to achieve the goal of increasing student achievement and engagement in a school for middle school students, you might first review school data to identify the students you're going to be working with, collect that baseline data that you're going to be comparing it to at the end of the school year, collaborate with administration and teachers to gain access to students and scheduling. This is a very important step as part of any research that you conduct, getting permission to do it. And your administration should know about your hope to be able to publish about this, and your school district can give you a lot of support about what's required in your district. Other planning parts is planning your pre and post interventions. How are you going to evaluate your study? What intervention survey do you need to create in order to collect perception data about whether you're achieving what you want to achieve from the idea of skills, knowledge, or attitudes? You might consider collecting data from teachers and parents. Ultimately, you need to plan the group and decide on how the group will be structured, and then ultimately deliver that group. It's often useful to keep an anecdotal record about what's happening in the group so that you know that you're able to report about that later. The next section, the next step is to observe. You've collected your baseline data, process, perception, and outcome data. You also need to collect that endpoint data so that we can see what benefits has the students gained from this. You want to be able to analyze that pre and post test data to really assess what the benefit is. The final step is to reflect. What do the findings mean? How will you use those findings? How will the findings be used to improve, validate, enhance the intervention? Who will you share these findings with? And how will the findings impact practice? So that's the story about conducting that research. How do you go about getting started with writing up what you've done? The next step is to begin the writing process. One suggestion is, again, that you consider collaborating with others to conduct the research that you want to conduct, that you are getting ideas from other people. You might invite a counselor educator to work with you, or vice versa. A counselor educator might reach out to a school. If you're unsure how to conduct or write about your work, we offer you the opportunity to submit a proposal to PSC, just a really short, almost like an abstract describing what you would like to write about. And if you're welcome to contact me at any point to share that abstract. And I've been able to find mentors and counselor educators interested in partnering with school counselors to help you with the writing process. Usually this process results in a very interesting collaboration. So please reach out to me or other reviewers and editors of the journal to get the support you need. But I'd be happy to discuss the proposal idea. So what's involved in writing a manuscript? I want to just take just the final section of our webinar to just talk to you about the parts of a manuscript. The first is an abstract. An abstract is a 75 word limit description of the purpose of the program, the purpose of what are you going to be addressing in this study, what were the results, and what are you going to be sharing with the reader. Looking at some published manuscripts, you will easily see the abstract as a blurb that is printed in one corner of the paper on the first page of our published manuscripts. Just a summary, really, a very brief summary of what you're going to be working on. I like to see an introduction, without the words introduction, but I'd like to see an introduction that is a brief description of the problem and with a description of the purpose and significance of the program that you're suggesting. And I'd like you to potentially talk about how this is related to school counselors, how it's related to the ASCA national model, and what contribution this study will make to the world of school counseling. At the end of the introduction, I love to see a sentence just stating the purpose of your research study. It's really important for the reader to not have to read 3 pages or 4 pages into your manuscript to find out what your study is going to be about. So just a brief sentence at the end of this introductory section to talk about what you're going to be discussing, what your research is going to be about. The next section that we require is a literature review. And the literature review is not quite as extensive as it is for featured research, but it is meant to point to setting the stage for your research. What is the issue? What are the statistics? What is the research that already exists about the issue that your program or intervention is going to be addressing? What does previous research tell us? And what are the gaps? Often a literature review helps us to know what isn't known. I mentioned that with the ESL group. We don't have a lot of information about self-esteem and how that impacts academic achievement for ESL students. And yet that was something that easily could be a focus of this particular study. So the literature review should be succinct, but needs to really be clearly directed to this particular study that you're going to do. At the end of the research or the literature review, before the methods, before the research, you're sharing the research, I would love to see an introduction to the site. Tell us where this research is going to be taking place, why this research is going to be taking place. Often this is a good place to introduce the research team, that the school counselor is the lead author, and he was the one who conducted the research and invited counselor educator into the collaboration and so forth. But set the stage for your specific research at the very end of the literature review, and possibly again sharing your research question or the purpose of your study. The next section, reporting the study, involves describing the method, the results, and the discussion. In the methods section, we want you to identify your research design. It could be a survey study, it could be a pre and post study, it could be a case study, but please describe what method it could be a qualitative study, what method you're going to be using for the design of your study. We also want a description of the setting, and it may be that you've already described that in your introductory section in the lit review, but if you haven't, then this belongs in the setting as well. A description of the participants, including their demographic data, If you're going to be describing the whole school, it's very useful to be able to talk about racial ethnic breakdown, free and reduced lunch, or so forth, as it relates to your particular study. What data are you going to be collecting? What instruments will you be using? Are you going to be creating an instrument yourself? Describing these in detail is very, very important. And what we see often in practitioner research is that a survey has actually been designed for this particular intervention, and the authors are willing to share that survey as in one of the appendices or one of the figures at the end of the article. You're going to want to describe the procedures and then how you're going to be analyzing the data. The results of the section of the study are often reported in very simple terms. This is not a place where you're analyzing or you're valuing the results in terms of whether you think the results were good or bad or indifferent. You're just reporting the results. And if you have a lot of results to share, it's really helpful to be able to put that in some sort of a table or a chart so that you really are using the results section of this to just be lifting up the most important aspects of the results section. The final section of the research paper is really to discuss the findings. What do the findings mean? How will these results be used? What else do you want the reader to know about the study? It might be that the results of if you looked at just GPA in the results section, that there was very little difference as a result of your intervention. But yet you've heard from parents and teachers and students that the intervention was life-changing. What are those stories that you want to share with us that are helping the research team decide how to use the results, what this means for the intervention, and how one moves forward? So this is really your opportunity to make sense of the results that you've shared in your research paper. And again, we are very interested in encouraging our practitioner, school counselor readers and having examples of lesson plans, having examples of surveys, of activity sheets. All of these are very, very helpful to practitioners, and so we encourage you to include those in your paper. The final sections of the journal are about really what can our readership make? How can they use what they've learned from you? So we really want you to focus on what can be learned from your specific research, not just in general about what advice you have to school counselors, but how can the findings, the process, the case study, how can this be used by practitioners? What do they mean for other school counselors? What advice would you have to school counselors that were starting a mentor program or were going to implement the AP program? What would you actually say to a group of counselors about this? And so thinking very clearly about how other school counselors can use what you found out is the goal of this section. We often sometimes write that implications for school counselor educators too, because sometimes the study might be around internships and it might be around things that school counselor educators might want to be focusing on in their preparation program. We also like to see a conclusion, which is again just a very short summary of the paper. It's just a good writing tool. You're expected to have references, obviously, and I mentioned appendices, tables, and figures. These all come at they're all, when you write the manuscript, they're all shown at the end, and then often these tables and figures are then published within your paper as our managing editor sees fit. So, but you, in putting together your manuscript, you put them all at the end. We use the 6th edition of APA for all writing and formatting guidelines. So we stick to this very carefully and expect that all authors use APA as the guidance for what they're writing. So I would really suggest those of you who are interested in pursuing practitioner writing and writing up all the things that you're doing, to go back and look at examples of practitioner research that has been published in PSC. In 2009, there was a special edition of practitioner action research that had, I think, between 13 and 17 examples of practitioner written manuscripts that all offer, they all were different and all offer some excellent examples. And then every month, there's, when you go on the website, you'll see our articles that are mentioned as practitioner research and provide excellent examples as well. For information around collecting data, here are some resources you might find useful. And we're finding folks are getting more and more sophisticated in their data collection abilities. And so I wonder if there are any questions.
We do have some questions that came in. So the first question is practitioner research equivalent to program research?
Tell me what you mean by program research, because if what you mean is that I'm going to evaluate a specific program, then it can be practitioner research. If you're talking about trying to evaluate your entire school counseling program, I'm not sure that qualifies as research.
Okay, this individual said, yes, I mean program evaluation.
Okay. Right, so I would focus practitioner research on one leaf in that whole tree. In other words, if I'm trying to evaluate my entire school counseling program, say, which is kind of what RAMP does, I'm really looking at all aspects of my program, and I'm not sure what kind of a focus that would be for an article. It might be an interesting case study to talk about how somebody goes about evaluating their program. But what we mean by practitioner research is typically very specific interventions that school counselors are using to address specific programs. And you'll see examples of PBIS programs that have been evaluated and mentorship programs that have been evaluated. But those are very specific, and they're just one aspect of the school counseling program. Have I addressed your question?
Yes, it seems that way.
Okay.
They said,
okay, good.
Can you recommend any books on learning how to conduct practitioner research?
Yes, so I can go back here on my PowerPoint, and you'll see that there are 3 that are often offered because they all are related to school counseling research. There are lots of wonderful books out there about practitioner research, but classroom practitioner research is a little bit different than ours. So I would really recommend the Dimmitt, Carey, and Hatch book or the Stone and DeHare book to provide some strategies. And Making Data Work, which is one of the ASCA books is very specific, not so much about practitioner research, writing about it, but just how to conduct a simple study and use some very simple ways of making sense of what you're doing.
Okay. Do you need
I see another question. Yes. Yeah. Okay. Go ahead.
Do you need IRB approval for practitioner research?
So what happens if you're conducting research with a university and a university counselor educator is going to be involved, the counselor educator typically needs, especially if they're the primary researcher, they need IRB approval because they're coming in from an outside source. What I see in schools are that teachers or school counselors are writing about specific projects that they're doing, and as they are deciding, or even before they decide that they want to write about this, they discuss this with their county or with their district evaluation committee. And I see very few districts requiring an IRB process, because in fact what's usually happening is that the individual's writing is masking the identity of students. No students are being named. The students that are participating in any of these programs have parent permission, and I've seen where the principal has said, please include that in your parent permission. So at the local level, I have not seen the need for an IRB at the same level as the university. When a university is involved, there is more of a process. And this is because we're really talking about very small projects here. We're not talking about an entire district, and so the rules could really be very different and if somebody's coming from an outside source to conduct research, then an IRB would be needed at the school district level too. So it's really, the answer is it depends.
Okay, and I think that's all the questions we have. So I think we can go ahead and wrap up.
Okay, thank you very much. And my email is here, and I'd be happy to answer any individual questions as you have them.
All right. Thank you so much. And thank you, Carol, for the presentation. And just a reminder, we will be posting this webinar on our website, on our webinar archive, but also I believe in some other places as well, likely on the journal page of our website, and maybe in some additional communication that we'll be sending out. And also, please check out the other webinars that we'll be offering in the next upcoming months. We do have quite an extensive list, so please check those out if you're interested. Thanks again, everyone, and thanks again, Carol. Have a good day.
Thanks. Bye.